Hello once again. This is Teacher Len and welcome to Unboxing Writing 3. Now before we begin our discussion, we're going to start by reviewing things that we learned from the 2 previous classes. In Unboxing Writing 1, you learned to decode words and their functions in sentences. We reclassified the parts of speech into foundational words, descriptive words, and connecting words. You also learned to identify the core subjects and verbs in sentences and recognize correct sentences of varying lengths. We looked at these sentences and we were able to decode why some of them are correct sentences while some of them are wrong sentences. For example, number 1 is correct. Number 2 is not correct. Number 3 is not correct. And number 4 is also not correct. While number 5 is actually a correct sentence. So this is because number 2, 3, and 4 are missing details to make them complete sentences. For example, number 2 is missing a verb. So one way to correct this is to add a verb. Number 3 is also missing a verb. So one way of checking this is adding a verb. Number 4 is missing both a subject and a verb. With your knowledge in Unboxing Writing 1, you're able to recognize fragments. And you should be able to edit your own sentences with this knowledge. In Unboxing Writing 2, you were able to learn that sentences represent meanings, and that sentences and compound sentences are of equal importance. So meaning, the meaning in sentence 1 is the same as the meaning in sentence 2 in terms of their importance. You also learned that there are different ways of writing compound sentences. Now, we studied these sentences and we learned that some of them are correct and some of them are not. So in number 1, for example, this is wrong because of the wrong punctuation. Number 2 is correct even though it is shorter than the others. Number 3 is also wrong because of the wrong punctuation or the lack of a coordinating conjunction. Number 4 is also wrong and number 5 is correct. We said that if we want to correct number 1, we have to make sure that we put in the correct punctuation after hot. And for number 3, the same principle, and number 4. Now we need to know how to use coordination conjunctions and treat it as glue to effectively join the first sentence and the second sentence in compound sentences. So let's go through some examples using the coordinating conjunctions and expand what we learned from last time. There are 7 coordinating conjunctions and we have examples here. For example, for the conjunction 4, we can have these sentences. I drank some water. 4, I was thirsty. She put on a sweater. 4, it was cold outside. 4 actually means the same as because. For and, we're just combining the 2 ideas here. And so we just say he was tired and he had a headache. For nor, this is something that we did not discuss in Unboxing Writing 2, but I'm going to give you examples now so that you will not be confused. These nor and yet are not so commonly used in casual writing, but they can be very useful, especially in advanced academic writing. So in this example, she doesn't drink milk, nor does she eat butter. And another example, I can't whistle, nor can I sing. Notice that you have an unusual arrangement of the subject and verb in the second sentence. Okay, let's look at these two examples. He didn't study last night, nor did he read his book. They were not wearing jackets, nor were they carrying umbrellas. Now, nor means also not. And like I said, nor requires unusual grammar. If you look at the first sentence, it contains a negative verb, right? He didn't, which is the contraction of he did not. And they were not in the second sentence, okay? So in the second sentence will contain a verb after nor before the subject. So in this case, you have nor did he read his book, nor were they carrying umbrellas. This is a rule that is applicable to the conjunction nor. We have also examples of the other conjunctions. For but, you have Tom studied a lot, but he didn't pass the test. And for yet, Tom studied a lot, yet he didn't pass the test. So yet means the same thing as but. And for or, again, you remember that it establishes alternatives. So he can buy the book or he can borrow it from the library. And for the conjunction so, this focuses on the result. So you say, Maria was thirsty, so she drank some water. It was cold outside, so she put on a sweater. So remember that I told you about conjunctions establishing relationships between the first sentence and the second sentence. But you can also join two sentences in a compound sentence this way. Look at these sentences. Heavy meals make people feel hot. Light meals can keep people cool. You had this last time. Fruits and vegetables make excellent snacks for children. Parents should have plenty available. Professional cyclist Lance Armstrong won races. He was accused of using illegal drugs. Michael Jackson is known as the king of pop. Aretha Franklin is referred to as the queen of soul. So these are correct compound sentences, and they are joined by the semicolon, which is considered a soft period. And the semicolon is strong enough to glue the first sentence and the second sentence together, especially if they have meanings that are closely related that you don't need to establish their relationship. Aside from those, we have what you call transitional expressions. These are especially useful when you're writing your essays or paragraphs. However, these transitional expressions are not strong enough to glue your first sentence and your second sentence together to form a compound sentence. Now let's look at this sentence. My uncle refused to pay his gas bill, which is your sentence 1. It has a subject and a verb, right? And then the second sentence is, he wrote a rude letter to the gas company. Again, it has a subject and a verb. However, you don't see any punctuation mark or any marking that would put the words together or connect the words together. So you call this a run-on sentence. And it is grammatically wrong. In this second example, there is an attempt to connect the two sentences together using a comma, but the comma is not strong enough to glue the two sentences together. And so you end up with a comma splice. Again, this is an incorrect sentence. The first one is a run-on sentence. The second one is a comma splice, both of which are grammatically wrong. So how do you do this? How do you use transitional expressions correctly and make sure that you don't commit errors in your writing? You're supposed to write it this way. So notice that we put a semicolon after the first sentence. And then we put a comma after the transitional expression. So this sentence is now a correct compound sentence. The semicolon provides the glue that joins the two simple sentences. Now notice the added comma after furthermore. Now, like we mentioned before, conjunctions actually establish relationships between the first sentence and the second sentence, and the same principle applies to transitional expressions. Now, if you want to have variety, or if you want to rephrase your sentences, you can actually use these transitional expressions instead of the coordinating conjunctions. So you can take a screenshot of this table because it can prove to be very useful when you're actually writing, if you want to achieve variety and readability in your writing. So let's look at some examples. You can write, my sister was accepted to Stanford and the university offered her a scholarship. See, you used a conjunction there and with a comma, right? But you can also write it this way. My sister was accepted to Stanford, semicolon. Furthermore, comma, the university offered her a scholarship. And they both have a combination relationship. Let's look at examples for contrast. See, my sister was accepted to Stanford, comma, but she decided to go to a local college. You can also write it this way. My sister was accepted to Stanford, semicolon. However, comma, she decided to go to a local college. Let's have another example for result. My sister was accepted to Stanford, comma, so she declined UCLA's offer. Or you can use a transitional expression. My sister was accepted to Stanford, semicolon. As a result, comma, she declined UCLA's offer. Very interesting, right? Okay, you can also use conjunction in this alternative relationship. My sister might accept Stanford's offer, comma, or she might wait for a better one. You can write it this way. My sister might accept Stanford's offer, semicolon. Otherwise, comma, she might wait for a better one. See, knowing these alternatives and knowing how to rephrase your sentences will be very helpful in establishing your ideas, and at the same time it will show your sophistication in being able to control the language. Okay, again we go back. So in a compound sentence, the first sentence and the second sentence have equal weight in terms of importance, as in this case. This is what we're going to study today. Unless you study, you will fail. Notice that the sentence "you will fail" and the idea behind it is actually greater or has more weight than the first sentence, which is not exactly a sentence, as you will learn. So in unboxing writing 3 today, you will learn about dependent and independent clauses very briefly, subordinating ideas in sentence writing, and different ways of rephrasing sentences for variety, although you just learned a few ways to do it earlier. So if we look at these sentences, when the moon blocks the light of the sun, there is a solar eclipse. And unless this country begins to take care of those in need, and if you leave, I'll cry. And this sentence, after the sun rose slowly over the mountaintop this morning, Eddie went for a run. Which among these do you think are correct sentences, and which among them are incorrect sentences? Number 1 is actually wrong. Number 2 is also wrong. Number 4 is also wrong. Surprisingly, only number 3 is correct. And you will find out why in this lesson. For number 1, this is wrong because you cannot use semicolon to separate when the moon blocks the light of the sun from there is a solar eclipse. For number 2, if you take out unless here, this sentence can actually be correct. And number 4, you are missing a punctuation mark to make it correct. So let's talk about clause first to get to the heart of the matter. Okay, a clause actually is a group of words that has a subject and a verb. It's different from a phrase because a phrase doesn't have a subject or a verb. It's like, for example, running in a marathon is a phrase. In the corner is a phrase. So that's not a clause. A clause has to have a subject and a verb. Now, there are two kinds of clauses. You have the dependent clause and the independent clause. The dependent clause is considered an incomplete sentence, and the independent clause is considered complete. In fact, the one that you learned in Unboxing Writing 1 is an independent clause because we studied the structure of the simple sentence, and a simple sentence is an independent clause. So let's have examples. An example of a dependent clause is this: although she studied hard. Notice that you have a subject there, she, and you also have a verb, studied. Let's look at an independent clause, which is actually a simple sentence. She failed the exam. This is a complete sentence. So what's the difference? The difference is the presence of the word although, which we're going to learn. So if we look at our Unboxing Writing 2, we studied this kind of sentence. The she studied hard, but she failed the exam. This is a compound sentence, right? Now in this example, although she studied hard, she failed the exam. This is a complex sentence. Alright, so although she studied hard is a dependent clause, and she failed the exam is an independent clause. So the combination of a dependent clause and an independent clause results in a complex sentence. Comparing it to compound sentence, you have two complete sentences there that are joined together. So therefore your formula is that independent clause plus comma in conjunction, independent clause results to a compound sentence. Okay? So therefore, we consider coordinating conjunctions as glue, strong enough to join together two independent clauses. Today we're going to learn about subordinating conjunctions. And the word although is an example of a subordinating conjunction, which we use when we write complex sentences. Like we said, conjunctions establish relationships, right? So do subordinating conjunctions. You can write them in compound sentences or you can write them in complex sentences, but you should know how to control them. So in terms of relationship, for combination relationships, we can use and you can use after, as, before, when, and while. You might want to take a screenshot of this. Again, very useful in your sentence writing, essay writing, paragraph writing. For contrast, you use the following coordinating conjunctions and subordinating conjunctions. but, yet, although, even though. For result, you use so or for, and then because and since. And for alternatives and possibilities, you can use or and if, even if, unless, until. Okay, so let's get to it. Combining two similar ideas, let's look at different ways of saying something. Okay, so the clouds passed and the moon appeared. After the clouds passed, the moon appeared. Now, basically, what's the difference between the two? Okay, so you say, teacher, one is a compound sentence and one is a complex sentence. But in terms of their meaning, okay, why would you choose to write it in a compound sentence and why would you choose to write it in a complex sentence? Okay, it depends on what you really want to say and what is more important in the sense or the nuance of what you are writing. Remember, the reason why you're writing is because you want to express something. And that something is a message. And what exactly do you really mean? For the first example, the clouds pass and the moon appear, there is equal importance for the idea behind the clouds passing and the moon appearing. But in the second example, you want to establish a sequence perhaps, like for example, after the clouds pass, then the moon appear, like so. And in terms of meaning, there is a slight difference there. So you have to know what you're really trying to say and use different structures and sentence styling accordingly. Let's look at another example. Contrasting two different ideas. So Blanca always remembers, but Bert always forgets. And in the next sentence you say, although Blanca always remembers, Bert always forgets. So what is the difference between the two? Okay, in the first sentence, the idea that Blanca always remembers and the idea that Bert always forgets have the same equal importance from the perspective of the writer. In the next sentence, however, the idea that Bert always forgets is slightly more important. Okay, so here's the thing. The idea that is in the independent clause is always the more important idea. I hope that's clear. I'm going to give you an example. For example, if the essay question asks you, where do you prefer to live in? Do you prefer to live in the city or the countryside? I always use this example. City or countryside? Now, if you want to say, for example, if you're a younger one, you can say, oh, I like the city and I also like the countryside. You can say it like that, and you can be forgiven because you're younger. But if you're older and you're being asked to make a stand, you can say it this way: although living in the countryside can be peaceful, I prefer to live in the city. So, guess what are you really going to talk about? You're going to talk about living in the city because the independent clause is the more important idea. So in this case, again, I repeat that sentence. Although living in the countryside can be peaceful, one idea, right? I prefer to live in the city. So your statement, I prefer to live in the city, is actually your topic sentence or your thesis statement in your paragraph or in your essay. That's why it's very important for you to know their difference. Right? Here's another example for showing a result. Our team won, so we celebrated. Again, equal importance. In the next sentence, because our team won, we celebrated. Maybe the writer, it's more important. The idea of the celebration is more important than the winning. A little bit. Although they are, of course, very, very closely related. And you can also show alternatives and possibilities this way. You must study or you will fail. Okay, the idea of studying and failing, same importance in the first sentence. But here, unless you study, you will fail. You want to emphasize that you will fail. So there's a slight emphasis there. Unless you study. Like so. Okay, so note that the parts of a sentence joined by a coordinating conjunction have equal weight. Like I've been saying. Alright, however, when you begin one sentence part with a subordinating conjunction, it often has less weight or emphasis than the other part. In other words, it becomes subordinate or less important. So that's what subordinating means. It becomes less important. So let's try to go deeper. Let's understand the relationships shown by subordinating conjunctions so that you can make decisions in terms of your writing. So if you want to show you want to show an expected result, you can write it this way. Since my alarm clock did not ring, I overslept. But if you want to show an unexpected result or contrast, you can say, although my alarm clock did not ring, I woke up on time. Interesting, right? What if you're going to write about conditions and outcomes? Okay, so we use the subordinating conjunctions if and unless to set up a condition. So if you do this, then unless you do this, then da 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 da. So for example here, if you clean up your room, you can go to the arcade. Unless you clean up your room, you can't go to the arcade. So different ways of saying things, right? So let's analyze this one. So Tom added lighter fluid, but the charcoal would not ignite. This is a compound sentence, comma and coordinating conjunction, right? Let's look at letter B. Tom added lighter fluid, semicolon. However, the transitional expression, then comma, the charcoal would not ignite. Let's look at another example. Although Tom added lighter fluid, subordinating conjunction at the beginning, the charcoal would not ignite. And for letter D, subordinating conjunction in the middle, the charcoal would not ignite, although Tom added lighter fluid. Now notice for letter C and letter D, if the subordinating conjunction is at the beginning, you have to put a comma after that dependent clause. But if you're going to put the subordinating conjunction in the middle, no comma is needed. Okay? So words used for sentence variety. Again, you might want to take a screenshot of this. Very, very useful tools when you are writing. See? These words establish the same relationship. So combination relationship, contrast relationship, result relationship, and alternatives and possibilities relationship. And you can vary your sentences depending on what you feel is more applicable as you are writing. Okay, let's look at how this is done. So the bookshelf shook in the earthquake. 2 books fell down. So this is a combination relationship. You can choose to write it as a compound sentence. So you write it with the coordinating conjunction and comma. So you can say, the bookshelf shook in the earthquake, comma, and 2 books fell down. You can again write it as a compound sentence with semicolon and transitional expression. You can say, the bookshelf shook in the earthquake, semicolon, consequently, comma, 2 books fell down. You can also choose to write it as a complex sentence with subordinating conjunction at the beginning of sentence. Say, when the bookshelf shook in the earthquake, comma, 2 books fell down. And for letter D, you can write it as a complex with subordinating conjunction in the middle of sentence. So 2 books fell down when the bookshelf shook in the earthquake, where you don't need a comma. So see, there are 2 ideas there. The bookshelf shook in the earthquake, 2 books fell down. And you can write them in different ways. Style A, style B, style C, style D. So teacher, which one is better? Not one sentence is better than the other. It's a matter of style. But you should know how to write them correctly with the correct punctuation and syntax or word arrangement. Okay, so you can choose to repeat this class, this presentation in our YouTube channel because we're going to post it there, or in Facebook Live. And repeat it until it becomes more familiar and more ingrained in you. And we're going to send you handouts and worksheets related to this lesson in your assigned emails. So thank you very much for joining us today. Victorious homeschoolers, thank you so much. And for those who are not enrolled in the Victorious, welcome and thank you also for joining us. And on behalf of the teachers and staff of Victorious Homeschool, thank you, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.